Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk about the DoorDash driver in the Idaho 4 case, Molly McMichael. Now, I know that a lot of people have been talking about the DoorDash driver already. I'm a little late to the party, but I really wanted to do a lot of research and talk to some people who were familiar with Molly McMichael before I made my video, because I really wanted to kind of understand who this witness was and a little bit about her background. So I want to say thank you to Christy Nevada because she tagged me in a lot of videos, and that's where I got to see a lot of this body cam footage that had to do with Molly McMichael. Now, I'm not saying that that's where the videos originated from. I know there's a big debate about who had them first, but Christy Nevada is where I got them from. So I just want to say thank you, Christy. Now, I want to say that the DoorDash driver, in my opinion, is key to this Idaho 4 investigation. I mean, we've been hearing about this DoorDash delivery from the very beginning. And a lot of us have been wondering who was the DoorDash driver. You know, we wanted to know who they were. What did they possibly see? Because they were dropping off a delivery at almost exactly the same time that investigators are telling us that these crimes began. So there's a lot to unpack here. I want to begin with an incident that happened to Molly McMichael and her husband Charles. Now, this is going to play a part a little later on in this video. Now, in November of 2013, Molly McMichael and her husband were trying to help a friend out. She was having some problems with her husband, and Charles McMichael was going over to their friend's house to change the locks on her trailer. Now, when he gets to the trailer, this friend's husband is already inside, and he has a firearm. Now, there's a confrontation, and this man, Nathaniel Nisbet, who was their friend's husband, takes Molly McMichael's husband's life with this firearm. So obviously that was very traumatic for Molly McMichael, and a long, drawn-out trial ensued. So, like I said, this is going to play a part later on in this video. Now, obviously this caused a lot of trauma for Molly, and Nathaniel Nisbet ended up being charged for this crime. So let's jump forward to September of 2024. Molly McMichael is pulled over basically for reckless driving, and she's arrested for DUI. She's in her boyfriend Jimmy's truck, and when she sat down in the back of the police car, she's answering questions for a female officer. And as this female officer is entering information into the computer, Molly can be heard having a conversation with a male officer as she sits in the back of this car. Now, you can kind of overhear their conversation, and it sounds as though they're familiar with each other. It sounds as though they know each other. This male officer is telling Molly that she needs to get some help and that she needs to stop running around with the people that she's hanging out with. Now, something else that he says is, "I didn't know that it was you when I pulled you over." So obviously they're familiar with each other and they have a rapport between each other. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, as Molly McMichael is answering questions for the female officer, she says, "I have to testify next year against Brian." And the female officer asks her to clarify who Brian is. I thought that it was kind of interesting that she refers to Brian Koberger simply as Brian. You know, it's kind of personal. Like she expects this officer to know who Brian is. And she explains to the officer that he's involved in the crime against the college girls in Moscow.
I'm supposed to testify against Brian next year.
Brian?
Yep, I killed all the girls over in Moscow.
Well, this won't change any of that.
On my record.
So she does let this officer know that she's a witness in the Idaho 4 case and that she's going to be testifying against Brian Koberger. So, of course, that caught everyone's attention because, she says it clear as day. Now, a lot of people have said that they believe that Molly McMichael tells this officer that she's going to be a witness in the Idaho 4 case in order to get some publicity or, in order to get some attention. But that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me because Molly McMichael is having a one-on-one conversation with this officer. She's obviously extremely upset. So she's probably not even thinking about the body cam that this officer is wearing. In my opinion, Molly McMichael is making this officer aware of this in order to possibly lessen her charges or because she's concerned that this DUI arrest could damage her credibility as a witness. Once Molly McMichael reaches the station, they sit her down for another interview with another female officer. And this officer is asking her about her medical history, medications that she may need, medications that she may be on, and, any type of substances she might have taken, any type of, alcohol that she may have consumed, because obviously she was arrested for DUI. So Molly McMichael begins to talk about a lot of the trauma that she's had in her life. And as you're watching this interview, you realize that Molly McMichael's had a tough life. She hasn't had an easy go of it by any means. So she's obviously very upset. She's crying uncontrollably. And, I think a lot of this could be because of the trauma that Molly has experienced. Now, as they're going through the questioning, Molly says something that I think blew all of our minds. And she says, "I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Brian there, parked right next to him." Now, I had heard that this is what she said from other sources, but I didn't hear that the first time that I watched this video. So I had to go get my headphones, put it on the desktop, and really listen to what Molly McMichael was saying. And she says, "I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Brian there, parked right next to him."
And
then now I have to testify. Make murder case too, so yeah, because I'm the DoorDash driver, so yeah.
you have to testify in which murder case?
Murder case for the college girl.
Oh.
I'm a DoorDash driver, I saw Brian there. Right next to him.
She says it pretty clearly. And so I'm not saying that what Molly McMichael is saying is factual. We don't know that. But we do know that Molly McMichael is the DoorDash driver. She's going to be testifying against Brian Koberger, and that she believes that she saw him at the King Roadhouse and that she parked right next to him. Now, a lot of people have said, how did Molly McMichael know who Brian Koberger was when she parked next to him? If she didn't know him. And I asked the exact same question. And the answer that I got is that Molly McMichael did not tell law enforcement that she saw Brian when she was initially questioned. She told them that she saw a white male in this white Hyundai Elantra. And she positively identified him after he was arrested. So, of course, when I heard this, when I saw this video, I started thinking, how credible is Molly McMichael? Because this is huge. This is an eyewitness who claims to see Brian Koberger at the King Roadhouse at the same time that law enforcement believes that these crimes occurred. So I started doing some digging into Molly McMichael's background. I started asking some questions. I started going back through her criminal history and looking at her criminal records. And one thing that I can say is that Molly McMichael does not have the extensive criminal history that we've been hearing about. Molly McMichael has very few charges on her record. And most of them, I would say the majority of them, are traffic violations. I mean, Molly McMichael does not appear to have any type of serious criminal record. So I found that really interesting because as I was going through her background, I'm expecting to see this paper trail because I'll be the first to admit that when I saw this video of Molly McMichael being questioned at the station, I thought that it was very possible that she could be a longtime substance abuser. You know, that's just what I thought. But I was wrong. I looked through her background and she just doesn't have the type of paperwork that you would expect to see from a substance abuser. She really doesn't. She doesn't have those types of priors. So I started thinking in a different direction, because Molly McMichael, in my opinion, it's very possible that she could be a very credible witness. Now, does Molly McMichael have some problems? Sure. Is she an angel? That's not what I'm saying at all. But I don't believe that Molly McMichael has this extensive criminal background that we've been hearing about. I believe that Molly McMichael truly believes that she saw Brian Kohberger at the King Roadhouse. Now, I'm not saying that's factual, but I do think that Molly McMichael truly believes that. And really, when we're talking about her criminal background, I don't see any reason why Molly McMichael would need to make that up. I mean, she doesn't have serious criminal charges where, she would feel like she needs to become an informant or something like that. She just doesn't have that criminal background. Now, am I saying that Molly McMichael doesn't have any substance abuse issues? That's not what I'm saying at all. I don't know that. I'm just saying that from my research and from going back into her criminal history, it doesn't appear that if she does have a substance abuse problem, that she gets in trouble for it. So, like I said, all we can do is look at the paperwork, look at the information that's right in front of us. I don't know Molly McMichael, so I don't know her character and I don't know how she lives her life. Now, of course, there is another side to this, and that is, if Molly McMichael parked right next to Brian Kohberger, right before he's going to go into this house and commit a quadruple homicide, I mean, that seems kind of strange to me, because we've already been led to believe that Brian Kohberger made all of these mistakes committing this crime, if he is the one who committed this crime. And, a lot of people have said, well, he's a criminology major and he studied criminology. He would know better than to not make these mistakes. And I've always said, you don't need to be a criminology major to know to not make those types of basic mistakes. I mean, you should know better just from common sense. So basically, now what we're being asked to believe is that Brian Kohberger purchased the weapon on Amazon, had it delivered to his house. Then he drove his own car to the crime scene, drove it all around the King Roadhouse, making sure that it was picked up on every single security camera in the neighborhood. And now he parked right in front of the house and a DoorDash driver pulled up right next to him. He sees this DoorDash driver, she sees him, and he still decides to go inside this house and commit a quadruple homicide. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. I mean, it seems as though this would just be another witness, and he would know that. You don't need to be a criminology major to know that maybe you shouldn't run into a house and commit a heinous crime after somebody has just looked right in your face out front. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, like I said, there's another side to this. Something else that I think is rather odd is that we've been told through court paperwork, as well as from Judge Hippler himself, that Dylan Mortensen is the only living witness who saw this perpetrator. Now, we know that she didn't see Brian Kohberger's face, so she couldn't identify him. She just saw someone in a mask. But we've been told that Dylan Mortensen is the only one who saw this perpetrator. And now we're hearing about Molly McMichael, and that Molly McMichael saw Brian Kohberger. So, to me, that's strange. You know, why would they come out in court paperwork and the judge himself say that Dylan Mortensen was the only witness to this perpetrator if that's not the truth? You know, it makes me wonder if the courts were even aware of what Molly McMichael is claiming that she saw. So let's get back to this incident that happened with Molly McMichael and her husband Charles in November of 2013 in Moscow, Idaho. Now, Nathaniel Nisbet is the individual who took Charles McMichael's life. And John Judge, Judge John Judge, was also involved in that case. Now, someone else was also involved in that case, and that was Bill Thompson. Bill Thompson was the prosecutor in that case, and I thought that that was kind of interesting. Now, something else is that I told you this story is going to come back around. Something else is that in June of 2022, 5 months before the Idaho 4 crimes occurred, Molly McMichael is pulled over. And guess who she's pulled over by? She's pulled over by Corporal Brett Payne. She's pulled over because she has a headlight out. And in the body cam footage, Brett Payne approaches the vehicle and he begins talking to Molly McMichael. Now, Jimmy, Molly McMichael's boyfriend, is also in the vehicle. And Molly McMichael pulls over. She's very cordial. She's very polite. And her and Corporal Payne have an interaction. And it seems very friendly. The cops, one thing that I can say in this body cam footage is that the law enforcement officers in Moscow, Idaho, as well as Pullman, seem to be very polite. If you notice in all this body cam footage, law enforcement seems to be pretty polite with the public. So anyway, that was just a side note. But so Brett Payne talks to Molly McMichael about this headlight that she has out. And Molly McMichael does not have proof of insurance. Now, she's telling Brett Payne that she does have insurance because she's out door dashing. And she wouldn't be able to use the DoorDash app if she was not insured. She just doesn't have a hard copy of her insurance. So Brett Payne says, you know, he takes her ID, he goes back to the car, and he starts entering her information into the computer. Now, when he goes back to Molly McMichael's car, he lets her know that he's going to give her a citation for lack of proof of insurance. And as they're talking, you know, they're having just some small talk real quick. Like I said, it was very cordial. Molly McMichael says, "I'm friends with Bill Thompson." That's what she says.
Yeah, I need to get it straightened out.
Yeah.
I've gotten one in the past. So
Yeah.
I'm friends with Bill Thompson.
Okay, alrighty, sounds good. Well, I'll just explain this to you real quick, okay?
This is 5 months before the Idaho 4 crimes occur. So this is in June of 2022. Now, that caught my attention, you know, because now I'm thinking, hold on a second. Molly McMichael also is friends with Bill Thompson? I mean, that seems kind of odd when you put that together. Now, of course, it's very possible that Molly McMichael got to know Bill Thompson during the whole trial with what happened to her husband in 2013, because he was the prosecuting attorney in that case. But That caught my attention real quick when Molly McMichael said, "I'm friends with Bill Thompson." You know, this is 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago now. But to me, that's odd. I didn't expect to hear that. And now I'm not saying that Molly McMichael is friends with Bill Thompson. You know, it's very possible that she just knows him from the trial that happened involving her husband. But, you know, and also maybe she was trying to get out of this ticket. But that's something that is definitely going to come back and haunt Molly McMichael, because in my opinion, that's not a good look for the prosecution. I mean, your witness, who is claiming that she pulled up right next to Brian Kohberger and looked right in his face, is also claiming to be friends with the prosecutor in the Idaho 4 case. It's just not a good look. So tell me what you think in the comments. Do you think that Molly McMichael is a credible witness? And do you think that there's a conflict there, being that Molly McMichael knows Bill Thompson? Now, Molly McMichael also seemed to be very familiar with the male officer from when she got arrested for the DUI. So how well does law enforcement in this town know Molly McMichael? Let me know what you think. And thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. I hope that you all had an amazing day. We'll see you next time.